Hi boys and girls, I'm firefighter Brendan, and today we're going to talk about some flammable liquids that you may find around the house or the garage or maybe in your basement. So with flammable liquids, it's important to understand that things like gasoline or paint thinner, the parts of these that are flammable is not actually the liquid, it's a vapor that rises above the surface. The reason this is important to understand is that vapors can travel further than just, say, the spill of a liquid. If there's a puddle of gasoline on the ground, those vapors can travel away from it, and they may not always be visible or obvious. We may not notice that they're there. And since they're the part that can catch fire, obviously, we need to be concerned about that and be aware of it. So some of the ways these vapors can spread, especially if they get loose, if there is a spill of something, these vapors they're gas, right? They can travel through cracks, underneath doorways, through air ventilation systems and filters and things like that. So it's difficult to contain vapors. They don't all act the same way. Some are heavier than air, so they'll settle in low-lying places like the cellar. Others are lighter than air, so they'll rise to the top. And others are equal, so that they'll spread evenly throughout a building or a structure. These type of gases and vapors can also spread through pipes and drains and things like that. So sometimes it can be a case where there isn't even a leak of something in your own house, and it can follow a pipe or another path in from the street or elsewhere. So the most common cause that we have for vapors to be in a home is from a spill, right? So spills can be caused by carelessness, improper containers, or sometimes just by simple accidents, right? Anybody can, misjudge something, overpour, drop something by mistake. These things all happen. Other causes can be loose connections, improper plumbing, things like that. Some of the ways we can avoid problems with flammable liquids are to use them properly. These should be used by adults. Children shouldn't be using flammable liquids until they're certainly old enough to drive, right? We're not supposed to pump gas until we're having a driver's license or learner's permit. So not for kids. We should always use flammable liquids outdoors or in a well-ventilated area. We don't want to use these things in the cellar when it's all buttoned up in the wintertime. Is not a great time to strip paint off things and whatnot. And we want to follow any rules and regulations and signs. So this comes into, we want to follow the instructions on the container. We want to follow, if we're at a gas station pumping gas or diesel or kerosene, we want to follow the placards and signs that are there because they'll help keep us safe, though they're there for a reason. And we want to store these things properly. So storing things in the proper containers is absolutely essential. And we're pretty good at it now, like as a society. We're pretty good at keeping things in the containers they belong in. So gasoline, for example, should always be stored in a red plastic container that's approved. It'll say gasoline on it. It'll be purchased specifically for a gas can. We used to store gasoline in metal containers. That's not common anymore. Metal containers can be punctured more easily. They also rust. The exception being some of the pre-mixed fuel for yard tools like chainsaws and things like that sometimes do come in metal cans. But regular gasoline should always be in plastic. And we want to keep things in their original container, whatever that might be. Like, for example, paint thinner or brush cleaner here. These are the sort of things that we might have around the house that sometimes it's tempting to say, oh, I've just got a little bit left. I want to get rid of this container. I'm going to put this into a baby food jar or whatever. And what we have here as an example is we have our peanut butter jar from 1996 that we don't know what's in here anymore, right? Dad poured some maybe gasoline, maybe oil, maybe a little of both into something and left it on the shelf and forgot about it. And now we don't know what it is. It's probably dangerous. It's not labeled. And this container is not safe, right? I'm not betting any money on a 20-year-old peanut butter jar holding up if it falls off the shelf. It's certainly not child-proof or anything like that. So we always want to store things in the right type of containers so that they're well marked, they're safe, and we know what they are. Flammable liquid should always be stored in the right type of location. So small things like paint thinners and oils and things like that should be stored in a metal fireproof cabinet that has self-closing doors. Big gas cans and things like this should always be stored outside, either in a shed or some sort of a protective container outdoors. They shouldn't be kept inside the house. Propane should never be kept inside the house because propane is one of the ones I was talking about that's heavier than air. So if it does leak, it has a tendency to fill up basements and things like that with nobody even being aware that there's a leak until those vapors find an ignition source and explode. So we always want to make sure they're stored in the correct location for where for the type of chemicals that they are, and also all of these things should be out of the reach of children. So maybe locked up in that cabinet, or maybe on a high shelf if we have a metal cabinet at home. Maybe putting that up high out of reach if it's not going to be locked. And lastly, when we're putting these things away, we want to make sure that we put the lids on tightly so we don't leave anything open for vapors to escape. And we want to make sure we clean up any brushes or rags or anything else that may have been in contact with the flammable liquid. We want to put those things in a metal sealed container and get rid of them. Oil-soaked and gasoline-soaked rags can spontaneously combust. But we want to make sure we clean up any materials that were in contact with the flammable liquid so that they don't become a hazard in and of themselves.
I'm firefighter Brent. Today we're going to talk about electrical hazards. First, we're going to talk about overloaded circuits. So has anybody ever seen, especially this time of year during Christmas, when we plug too many cords into one outlet, and then it draws too much power and it generates heat? And what happened in this one was, actually started a small fire and burned the electrical box and the outlet itself. But it can be more than just these. You can do that to a surge protector if you have too many things plugged into it. This one looks like it may have even been just too close to a heat source. Like a radiator, we want to keep them away. We also want to keep them away from water. So electricity and water don't mix. So we want to make sure that whenever we're using electrical appliances, that we're in a dry area. If we're going to use an extension cord, we want to make sure we're using the right extension cord for the tool that we're using. Some tools use too much electricity for the cord. Something like this is a very thin electrical extension cord with very thin wire. This wouldn't be rated to run any like heavy duty appliance like a saw or anything. Not that we should be using saws, but we want to make sure we're using the right cord for the job. On the other hand, this is a much heavier extension cord here. This one actually looks like it came off of the saw potentially. But it looks like it wasn't plugged into an appropriate extension cord. And what happened was it melted down. So this cord also has some nicks in it. You can see that there's some cuts in the wire itself with exposed cable. So what happens is if we cut the insulation on it, we run the risk of electrocution. So we want to make sure that there's no exposed wire. Some other electrical hazards are common. This was an electric tea kettle. Does anybody have an electric kettle at home? So this was used for making tea. You put water in it. But what happened was this ran out of water and it melted down. It actually caused a fire. When we're using extension cords, we want to make sure that they're free of knots. Like this one's all tied up and tangled. We want to make sure they're free of knots, and we want to inspect the cord before we use it. So when we're using an extension cord, we want to make sure we're not putting it underneath the carpet, because that creates a hazard for fire. If we have any damaged cords, it's important that we replace them and not use them. We want to be using updated cords. This cord is insulated with fabric, like a yarn instead of a rubber. This used to be how we made them, but now there's safer options. So we should retire this and get a new soldering iron. Appliances like an air conditioner, most of us have air conditioners at home. Those should be plugged directly into the wall. We shouldn't be plugging those into any sort of extension cord or a power strip because they draw too much electricity. And lastly, we're going to talk about space heaters. So opposite of an air conditioner, we have space heaters. We plug them into the wall, and we use them to heat up a room. Maybe somebody has them in a basement, or some area where we don't otherwise have heat in the house. They draw a lot of electricity, and they get very hot to the touch, and that's how they work. The problem is, if we leave it unattended or something leaning up against that space heater, we can cause a fire.
I'm firefighter Brendan, and we're just going to chat today about some of the dangers of smoking. So I think we all probably know that smoking has a lot of health concerns, right? It can lead to lung problems like cancer, COPD, emphysema, all these nasty diseases that make it really hard to breathe. It can also lead to oral and dental problems, so people have bad teeth and gum problems, and also they have really bad breath. But smoking can also lead to other problems that don't involve your breathing. It can lead to heart problems, first and foremost, and heart disease is one of the leading causes of death in adults in the United States. It can also cause high blood pressure and strokes and all sorts of other nasty things that we just don't want to happen to us or those that we love. In addition to the health risks of smoking, which extend to those around the person who smokes because of secondhand smoke in the home or the car, smoking is also a fire hazard, right? Because we're lighting that cigarette on fire every time we have a puff. So careless disposal of smoking materials, which includes everything from not putting cigarettes out all the way to falling asleep smoking, or anything like that, is one of the leading causes of fires in the United States. A lot of home fires are caused by that. And obviously just the presence of cigarettes and matches and lighters and all the things that go with it make it you're that much more likely to have a fire in your home just by those things being around and being used. We've seen a decrease in fires as less and less people have smoked over the last several decades. Really, there's been a pretty big public health push to stop people from starting smoking. And in conjunction with that, we've seen a decline in the number of home fires. But we want to push that number all the way down to zero. We want there to be no one suffering the health risks of smoking and no fires from smoking. One other side effect of of smoking is that people frequently disable their smoke alarms. Now, you probably remember from previous classes about how important it is to have working smoke detectors throughout the home. Obviously, if you're smoking inside the house, that smoke will set off the smoke detectors, which is inconvenient and annoying for the smoker. So people will frequently disable their smoke alarms, which often leads to them not being alerted when there is a real fire because the smoke alarms are not present or they're not working. So these are just a few of the reasons why smoking is really dangerous for us, both for our health and for fire safety, and why we encourage everyone to not start smoking, and for people who do smoke, we encourage them to seek help to quit. Thank you very much.